The grand courtroom of Regency England stood resplendent, its high ceilings adorned with intricate plasterwork that cast ethereal shadows across the polished wooden floors. Rows of elegantly dressed gentlemen and ladies filled the benches, their garments reflecting the wealth and power of the aristocracy. The air was thick with anticipation, and a low murmur rippled through the crowd, a symphony of whispers that spoke of judgment and condemnation. At the front of the room, under the imposing gaze of the judges, stood Lady Isadora Pelham, her heart pounding in her chest like a war drum. Isadora's striking features were momentarily obscured by the flickering light of the chandelier above. Her auburn hair, styled meticulously, framed her face, highlighting the expressive green eyes that darted nervously over the crowd. She wore a gown of pale blue silk that shimmered subtly, but it did little to shield her from the scrutiny that felt like 1,000 daggers aimed at her very soul. The whispers grew louder as she stepped forward, the weight of expectation pressing down on her slender shoulders. "What a disgrace," a voice floated from the back of the room, followed by a ripple of laughter that made Isadora's cheeks flush with shame. This was the moment she had both prepared for and dreaded. The court convened to decide her worthiness in a society that placed value solely on titles and lineage. The charges against her, a young woman of noble birth, were a cruel mockery of her character. Accusations of being worthless echoed in her mind, a phrase that now felt like a permanent brand upon her identity. She stood alone, a figure trapped in a narrative crafted by the judgments of those who held power over her fate, and the implications of their verdict weighed heavily on her fragile spirit. As the judges settled into their seats, the atmosphere became even more tense. Isadora's pulse raced, a rapid tattoo matching the thud of her heart. Time felt as if it had stretched beyond its limits, each second agonizingly prolonged. Her mind flashed to her father, the late Earl Pelham, and the pride he had instilled in her. He had nurtured her dreams, teaching her to believe in herself amid the swirling currents of societal expectations. But standing here now, she felt his absence keenly, a void that amplified her sense of isolation in this sea of judgment. The presiding judge, a stern man with a silver wig that seemed to symbolize the weight of tradition, cleared his throat, silencing the crowd with a mere gesture. Each dignified nod and disapproving glance directed at her felt like a verdict already passed. As he began to read the charges, Isadora forced herself to hold her head high, though her legs trembled beneath her. She focused on the intricate designs of the courtroom, a distraction from the harsh reality she faced. The bold, carved oak panels, the gleaming brass fittings, and the warm glow of candlelight created an atmosphere that was both beautiful and suffocating. "Lady Isadora Pelham," the judge's voice rang out, deep and unwavering. "You stand accused of bringing disgrace upon your family name. It has been said that you are unworthy of your title, that you lack the qualities that define a lady of your rank." Each word felt like a lash against her dignity, a reminder of the expectations she had been unable to fulfill. The murmurs of the crowd swirled around her, a tempest of judgment and disdain that threatened to overwhelm her. Amid the chaos of her thoughts, a sudden resolve ignited within her. How could they define her worth based only on their narrow perceptions? She recalled the moments that shaped her, her laughter shared with friends, the joys she had found in helping the less fortunate, the strength she had shown in the face of adversity. These were the facets of her character that truly defined her. But would they see that? Would they recognize the lady who stood before them, not as an object to be judged, but as a person of value and strength? Just then, a figure appeared at the door, slicing through the tension like a knife. The Duke of Ashcombe, a man whose mere presence demanded respect, entered with an air of authority that commanded attention. His sharp features were softened by a look of concern directed toward Isadora. As their eyes met, a flicker of something unspoken passed between them, a connection that transcended the circumstances of the moment. The energy in the room shifted, a palpable tension replaced by a glimmer of hope. "Your Grace," a murmur ran through the court as he approached the bench. Isadora's heart quickened. The Duke had always been an ally, a man known for his fairness and integrity. The knowledge of his presence provided her with a brief reprieve from the storm of emotions threatening to drag her under. She longed for his support, a beacon of light in the oppressive darkness surrounding her. As the Duke took his place beside her, the crowd fell silent, all eyes riveted on the duo. He stood resolutely, a paragon of strength amidst a gathering of judgment. "I believe," he began, his voice calm yet firm, "that worth is not merely a matter of birth, but rather a reflection of one's character and actions." The weight of his words hung in the air, igniting a spark of defiance within Isadora. Could it be that someone of his stature would dare to challenge the status quo? With that single statement, the atmosphere in the courtroom began to shift. Isadora felt a new sense of determination rise within her as she prepared to face the judgment not only of the court but of herself. Would this be the moment she reclaimed her narrative, rewriting the perceptions that had long dictated her worth? The questions lingered, heavy yet filled with promise, as she stood resolute in the eye of the storm, ready to confront the tumultuous waves of society's expectations. As Isadora stood nervously at the center of the grand courtroom, the whispers surrounding her felt like a tightening noose, each murmured word a reminder of the weight of societal expectations pressing down on her shoulders. The opulence of the setting, with its golden chandeliers and marbled floors, contrasted sharply with the turmoil churning within her heart. She could feel the scrutinizing gazes from the nobility seated in the gallery, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disdain. Each face was a mirror reflecting her perceived failures, judging her worth as if it were laid out for public appraisal. In those moments of overwhelming pressure, Isadora's thoughts drifted back to simpler times. She remembered her father, the late Earl Pelham, who had always encouraged her to dream without constraint. He had been a steadfast supporter of her ambitions, instilling in her a sense of purpose and vision that flourished in the security of their estate. As a child, she would often wander the vast gardens, imagining a life filled with adventure and achievements. The garden's vibrant colors would inspire her dreams. She had envisioned herself as a champion of the downtrodden, capable of challenging the norms that sought to bind her. But now, those dreams felt distant, eclipsed by the harsh judgments of society. The echoes of her father's unwavering belief in her potential reverberated in her mind, clashing with the pervasive doubt that had seeped into her being. She remembered the laughter they had shared, the late-night conversations that would stretch into the early hours, where her father would share tales of daring women who had changed the course of history. He had made her believe that she could be one of them. Yet, here she stood, confronted with the very definition of worthlessness as dictated by those who valued her only for her title. As the judge's voice cut through her reverie, she snapped back to the present. "What do you have to say for yourself, Lady Isadora?" His words were heavy with expectation, and Isadora felt them like a weight on her chest. She glanced around the room, attempting to find solidarity among the sea of aristocratic faces. However, her heart sank as she saw only a sea of indifference and judgment. Her throat tightened, and she struggled to formulate a response. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye, pulling her attention to the entrance of the courtroom. The Duke of Ashcombe strode in, his presence commanding the room's attention. He was a figure of authority, with a reputation that preceded him, known for his fairness and intellect. Isadora's pulse quickened at the sight of him. He had always been a constant in her life, a friend, and now, perhaps an unexpected ally. What would he think of her now? As he approached, the atmosphere in the room shifted, a collective gasp rising from the audience. The whispers grew louder, fueling the tension that enveloped Isadora. The Duke locked eyes with her, and for a fleeting moment, the chaos around her faded away. There was a connection in his gaze that spoke volumes, an unspoken promise of support and understanding. "Your Grace," the judge acknowledged, momentarily taken aback by his sudden entrance. The Duke nodded, his expression serious yet compassionate. "I wish to address the court regarding Lady Isadora's character." His voice resonated, filling the courtroom with an authority that demanded attention. Hope blossomed within Isadora, a fragile flower in a tumultuous storm. "Character, my lord, is often assessed by the standards of society, standards that Lady Isadora has been unjustly accused of failing to meet." His words, rich with conviction, rang true, each syllable a lifeline thrown into the sea of her despair. "I have had the privilege of knowing her, and I can attest to her unwavering strength, her compassion for others, and her relentless spirit. She is anything but worthless." The crowd reacted with a mix of shock and intrigue. Isadora's heart swelled at the Duke's defense, It felt as if he were not only standing up for her but also challenging the very fabric of societal norms that had dictated her worth. It was a declaration that transcended their current predicament, a rallying cry against the conventions that sought to limit individual potential based on rigid hierarchies. As she stood there, caught between the weight of her past and the hope of a future reshaped by the Duke's conviction, Isadora felt her resolve solidify. She would not allow them to define her worth any longer. The whispers that once suffocated her began to fade, replaced by an ember of determination ignited within. It was time to reclaim her narrative, to reveal the woman she had always known she could be. "Your Grace, she started, her voice wavering but gaining strength as she found her footing. The Duke turned to her, nodding slightly, encouraging her to continue. The moment was pivotal. It was her opportunity not just to respond to the accusations but to assert her identity, to demand recognition of her true self. "I am not merely a title, nor am I a reflection of what others believe I should be. I am Isadora Pelham, a woman with dreams, passions, and convictions. I stand before this court not just as a lady of rank but as a representative of all who have been deemed worthless by a society too quick to judge." The words flowed from her, each one a declaration of her identity. She could feel the energy in the room shift again, a ripple of surprise mixed with admiration coursing through the audience. As she spoke, the weight of judgment began to lift, replaced by an emerging sense of possibility. This was her moment to define herself beyond the confines of societal expectations, to assert her place in a world that had tried to render her invisible. As the murmurs began to circulate once more, Isadora stood tall, ready to face whatever came next, knowing she was no longer alone in this fight. The Duke's support was more than just symbolic, it was a testament to the change that was beginning to unfold, a beacon for others who had also been silenced. The courtroom, once a space of accusations, was transforming into a ground for empowerment, a stage for her truth to shine. As the proceedings continued, the tension in the courtroom thickened, the air heavy with unspoken accusations and whispered judgments. Lady Isadora Pelham stood resolute at the center, while the Duke of Ashcombe approached with an air of undeniable authority. His entrance, like a sudden gale, stirred the stagnant atmosphere, drawing all eyes toward him. The murmur subsided, replaced by a palpable anticipation, as if the entire room held its breath, waiting for his next move. "Your Grace," the judge acknowledged with a hint of unease, his gavel poised to maintain order. The Duke nodded, his gaze shifting momentarily to Isadora, conveying an unspoken promise that he was there for her in this tumultuous moment. Despite the weight of the scrutiny upon her, Isadora felt a flicker of hope ignite within her chest. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court," the Duke began, his voice rich and melodic, commanding attention. "I come before you not merely as a member of the nobility but as an ally of truth and justice." His words resonated through the chamber, echoing against the ornate walls adorned with gilded decorations. "Today, we stand on the precipice of a decision that could alter the course of a young woman's life. I ask you to consider her not through the lens of societal prejudice but through the essence of her character." Isadora, emboldened by his support, felt her heart swell as the Duke continued. "Lady Isadora Pelham is more than a title. She embodies resilience and determination." Each word he spoke felt like a protective barrier around her, shielding her from the judgments that sought to define her worth. "I have witnessed her strength firsthand, as she navigates a world that is often unkind to those who do not conform to its rigid expectations." The audience reacted with gasps and murmurs, some intrigued, others skeptical. Isadora's pulse quickened. Here was a man who dared to defy convention, to stand by her side against the tide of societal norms that sought to silence her. His presence was a lifeline, a beacon of support that illuminated her darkest fears. As Isadora locked eyes with him, she saw not just a nobleman but a partner in this fight against injustice. The connection between them deepened in that moment, transcending the boundaries of their respective roles. He believed in her, and that belief fueled her resolve. With each passing second, the weight of public opinion began to lift, replaced by a burgeoning sense of agency. "Your Grace," she interjected, her voice steady despite the tremors of uncertainty that rippled through her. "To speak of my worth is to acknowledge the worth of every woman who has been silenced, judged, or deemed inadequate. I stand here not solely for myself but for those who have fought battles against the greater forces of our society." The words flowed from her with newfound conviction, igniting the audience's curiosity. The Duke's eyes sparkled with admiration as he leaned slightly closer, encouraging her to continue. "I refuse to be defined by a set of archaic standards that measure a person's value solely by their lineage or wealth. My worth is intertwined with my dreams, my passions, and my desire to contribute to a society that often overlooks the extraordinary capabilities of women." She could feel the tension shift, the atmosphere vibrating with a sense of possibility. The collective gaze of the court was no longer a judgmental weight but a canvas upon which she could paint her truth. The murmurs resumed, but this time, they were more curious than condemning. "Many of you may question my character, my capabilities," Isadora continued, her heart racing with each declaration. "But I stand here as living evidence that societal norms must evolve. It is time to reshape the narrative." The audience leaned in, captivated by the passion that fueled her every word. With each statement, she felt her identity reclaim its power, weaving itself into the very fabric of the court's proceedings. The Duke's presence by her side was not just that of a protector, he was a fellow advocate for change, a symbol of hope amidst a landscape rife with inequality. "Your Grace," the judge interjected, seeking to regain control, yet his voice faltered against the surge of emotion in the room. "I must remind you that we are here to discuss the matters at hand relevant to Lady Isadora's case." But the Duke, unfazed, met the judge's gaze with unwavering resolve. "Indeed, we are. And I assert that matters of character and integrity are directly relevant to any judgment made today. Lady Isadora represents not an isolated case, but a reflection of the countless women whose voices have been stifled throughout generations." The audience's attention shifted, their preconceived notions challenged by the Duke's unwavering stance. Isadora felt the weight of collective eyes upon her, a mix of skepticism and intrigue swirling around her. In that moment, she realized that the court was not merely a place of judgment, it was a battleground for redefining narratives and reclaiming lost identities. As the tension coiled tighter, she prepared to speak again, feeling the Duke's steadfast presence bolstering her. "I stand not alone but as a testament to every woman who has had to fight for recognition. Let us pave a path forward that embraces the strength and potential within all individuals, regardless of their societal standing." The murmurs transformed into whispers of agreement, there was a shift in the air, a dawning realization amongst the onlookers. Isadora's passionate plea resonated, breaking down the barriers erected by societal norms. Within the confines of the courtroom, hope blossomed. Change was not just a distant dream, it was a palpable force ready to alter the very fabric of their society. As Isadora and the Duke exchanged a glance filled with understanding, a silent promise was made. They would stand together against the tide of injustice, determined to rewrite the narrative and forge a new hierarchy defined not by birthright but by the richness of character. The court held its breath, caught in the transformative moment between the past and an uncertain future. Isadora felt the weight of expectation in the courtroom as she stood before the judge, the murmurs of the audience echoing in her ears. The Duke, her unexpected ally, had just defended her with fervor, his words ringing out like a clarion call against the suffocating norms of society. As she glanced at him, a flicker of hope ignited within her heart. For the first time, she did not feel like a pawn in their game, she felt empowered, ready to confront the societal giants that had kept her suppressed. "Your Grace," she began, her voice gaining strength, "I stand here not in defiance of the court but in the spirit of truth. The judgment of my worth is not for a select few to decide, it is for every woman who has ever been marginalized." The audience quieted, their eyes fixed on her, intrigued by the fire within her. The air crackled with tension as she continued, "Women like me have been ridiculed and dismissed, deemed worthless by those who fail to recognize our contributions. I urge this court to reconsider its definition of value. Worth is not measured by wealth or lineage but by courage, resilience, and the ability to inspire change." As Isadora spoke, she sensed the shift. The Duke watched her with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. He understood her struggle, the silent battle she fought against the confines of societal expectations. Those brief moments where their eyes met were filled with unspoken promises. She could feel a bond forming, one that transcended their roles in the courtroom. The judge, clearly taken aback by the passion of her speech, struggled to regain control. "Lady Isadora, we are here to determine the specific allegations against you, not to engage in broader societal debates." The Duke rose to his feet again, his voice unwavering as he interjected, "With all due respect, Your Honor, these allegations reflect societal prejudices that have long been accepted without question. If Lady Isadora's character can be contested based on her gender alone, then we are grappling with significant moral implications." As the Duke articulated the injustice, Isadora felt a surge of gratitude mixed with apprehension. The courtroom, once filled with murmurs of her worthlessness, was now alive with the possibility of transformation. She knew that with each word spoken, they were not just defending her, they were challenging the very fabric of a society that had long been resistant to change. "Lady Isadora," the Duke continued, "is emblematic of those who have been silenced. If the court dismisses her without consideration, it sets a dangerous precedent for how we view and treat women in our society. Every voice matters, and that includes the voices of those whom society deems lesser." The atmosphere thickened with anticipation. Isadora could see the audience beginning to shift in their seats, their expressions reflecting curiosity rather than condemnation. For the first time, she felt a sense of unity among those present. They were not just spectators anymore, they had become participants in a conversation about equality and justice. "Your Grace," Isadora addressed him, her heart racing. "Thank you for standing with me. But we must not only speak. We must act." Her resolve solidified as she looked around the room. "I refuse to let my worth be defined by the opinions of others. This is a moment for all women who have faced similar challenges. We must rally together and demand the recognition we deserve." With that proclamation, a stirring began in the courtroom. The murmurs grew, and she could sense a wave of solidarity rippling through the audience. Isadora's courage was like a spark, igniting flames of determination in the hearts of those who had silently witnessed her struggle. She was no longer alone, she was at the forefront of a movement. The judge, still recovering from the impact of their words, attempted to steer the proceedings back to the case at hand. "While your sentiments are poignant, we must focus on the allegations." But Isadora interrupted, her voice rising above the din, "Are we to ignore the context of those allegations? They are rooted in a society that judges women based on outdated ideals. We are here to rewrite the narrative, to evolve into a society that values individuals for who they are rather than where they come from." Her fervent declaration seemed to resonate with the onlookers, and the Duke stepped closer, visibly moved by her unwavering spirit. Each step she took toward the truth was a step toward dismantling the barriers that had held countless women back. "Let us not shy away from the truth," he replied, a newfound conviction in his tone. "Let us embrace it, for in doing so, we may illuminate the path for future generations." Lady Isadora represents not just herself but every woman who has dared to dream in the face of adversity. The tension in the room transformed into palpable energy, a shared understanding of the stakes at play. The Duke's support fortified Isadora's resolve, and together they stood against a tide of prejudice that had persisted for far too long. As the proceedings continued, Isadora realized that this moment was not merely about her own worth, it was about a collective awakening. She was forging connections, igniting conversations that had long been dormant, and inspiring those who had felt voiceless to reclaim their identities. "Together, we can reshape this court, this society," Isadora declared with fervor. "Let us rise against the confines of our circumstances and ensure that no woman is ever deemed worthless again." With every pulse of her heart, she felt the weight of history present. The courtroom was no longer just a backdrop for judgment, it was a crucible for change, and she was prepared to fight for it. The Duke's steady gaze served as a reminder that she was not alone in this battle, and as the moment crystallized, Isadora understood that they were both rewriting the hierarchy, one powerful declaration at a time. The tension in the courtroom reached a boiling point as Isadora prepared to confront her accusers. The air crackled with anticipation, every eye fixed upon her as if waiting for a spark to ignite the powder keg of emotions that had been brewing since the trial began. She stood taller now, a woman transformed, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. This was not just about her, it was about every woman who had ever been deemed worthless by society's harsh judgments. As she stepped forward, the whispers subsided into an almost palpable silence. The Duke, who had remained steadfastly by her side, gave her an encouraging nod. His own expression was a mixture of admiration and concern. He understood the weight of this moment. The room swelled with unspoken words, each one laced with the collective history of countless women who had suffered under the weight of societal expectations. "Your Grace," Isadora began, her voice steady despite the tumult within. "I stand here not only for myself but for all those who have been silenced, who have had their worth questioned because they did not conform to the limitations set upon them." The words flowed from her like a river, each syllable infused with passion and purpose. She could feel the energy of the room shifting, drawing the audience into her narrative. Behind her, the judge sat rigid, struggling to maintain order. "Lady Isadora, we must focus on the accusations levied against you," he interrupted, but she pressed on. "Those accusations, Your Honor, are steeped in a society that values women for their titles and dowries rather than their intellect and spirit. I refuse to be defined by the opinions of those who have never walked in my shoes." With each word she uttered, Isadora felt her inner strength swell, as if a lifelong tether of expectation was finally severing. The Duke stood to his full height, a commanding presence among the spectators. "What Lady Isadora speaks is the truth that needs to be acknowledged," he said, his voice ringing clear. "We cannot allow the court to dismiss her as worthless without addressing the injustices that have led us here. If we do so, we perpetuate a cycle of shame and silence." The audience shifted, their expressions reflecting newfound awareness. Isadora noticed a few nods among the attendees, faces that had previously worn disdain now beginning to soften. Encouraged, she continued, "I will not let this court reduce me to a label, a mere statistic in a patriarchal society that has long underestimated women. We are more than our circumstances, more than the judgments cast upon us by those who refuse to see beyond their privilege." A ripple of energy surged among the spectators, and Isadora seized the moment. "I urge each of you to reconsider your own perceptions of worth. Are we to blindly uphold a system that devalues individuals based on an arbitrary measure of status? Or shall we stand together to champion the inherent value of every person, regardless of gender?" Her voice rose, stirring the hearts of those who listened. The Duke's gaze locked onto hers, a glimmer of admiration evident in his eyes. "Lady Isadora, you are igniting a fire within this room," he remarked, his tone both supportive and inspiring. "Your courage is not only your own. It reflects the struggles of many who have faced similar trials." Isadora's heart soared at his words. She felt the weight of their shared journey, the unspoken bond of loyalty and respect that had blossomed between them. This moment was theirs, a testament to their resilience against an oppressive societal structure. "Together, we must create a new narrative," she pressed on, drawing her audience closer. "I invite those who hear me to join in this fight for justice. This is not merely my battle, it is a call to arms for all who believe in equality." A powerful silence surrounded her words as they hung in the air, each listener wrestling with their own convictions. The Duke stepped forward, his proximity lending weight to Isadora's message. "We must not shy away from difficult conversations. It is through dialogue that we can begin to dismantle the barriers that divide us." In that pivotal moment, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted from one of skepticism to hope. Isadora could feel the collective heartbeat of her audience align with her vision. A woman seated in the front row, once known for her sharp tongue and societal critiques, nodded solemnly, her expression transformed. "Your Honor," Isadora turned once more to the judge, who had fallen silent, "I ask you to consider the implications of this case not just for me, but for every woman who has ever felt devalued. Our worth is intrinsic, not dictated by circumstance or societal judgment." With each word, she carved a space for empathy, her vulnerability becoming a beacon of strength. The courtroom, once a place of judgment, was now a forum for change. Isadora's eyes shone with determination as she continued, "If we fail to recognize the value of individuals, we risk losing the very foundation of our humanity." The Duke nodded approvingly, his expression a mixture of pride and support. "Let this be a turning point," he declared to the audience, "a moment where we take a stand against prejudice and emerge as allies to those who have been marginalized." The energy was electric, and Isadora felt a swell of belief rising within her, fed by the passion of their shared words. "I am not worthless," she proclaimed, her voice resonating through the courtroom. "I am worth fighting for, just as every woman and every man in this room is worth fighting for. Let us rise together." As her speech concluded, Isadora stood resilient, feeling the echoes of her declaration reverberate through the chamber. The Duke's presence beside her fortified her resolve, and in that moment, they understood that they were igniting a change that would ripple far beyond the walls of the courtroom. The tide of societal opinion was beginning to shift, and with it came the hope of a more equitable future. As the courtroom settled into a tense silence, the weight of the moment hung heavily in the air. Isadora Pelham, feeling the warmth of the Duke's unwavering support, took a deep breath. The echoes of her previous declaration still reverberated within the chamber, but this was a different moment altogether. Here, nestled within the confines of societal judgment, she had emerged not just as the accused but as a beacon of resilience. The judge's gavel struck the wooden surface, demanding attention as he prepared to deliver his verdict. Isadora could scarcely catch her breath as she envisioned the possible outcomes. Would her pleas for understanding resonate through the halls of aristocracy? Or would her efforts be dismissed as mere musings of a woman deemed unworthy? Her pulse quickened as she clutched the edge of the wooden railing before her, seeking solace in its sturdy form. Next to her, the Duke exhibited a calm that belied the storm brewing within. His mere presence was a reassurance, a silent promise that no matter the outcome, he would stand by her side. She could feel the shared weight of their unspoken bond amplifying the stakes. With every glance, he communicated his steadfast belief in her worth, enhancing her own sense of value. "Lady Isadora," the judge finally intoned, his voice echoing across the courtroom, "the court acknowledges the complexities surrounding your case." Isadora braced herself, every nerve ending alert to the implications that loomed ahead. "In light of the compelling arguments presented, and the undeniable courage you have displayed, I find it necessary to address the societal constructs that have dictated perceptions of worth." As he spoke, a ripple of astonishment coursed through the audience. Isadora had expected skepticism, a dismissal of her claims, but what she heard was something unexpected, a challenge to their preconceived notions. The murmurs shifted from judgment to contemplation. The Duke's firm gaze remained fixed on the judge, and she could feel the lightness of hope beginning to unfurl within her. "Your struggle resonates beyond the mere confines of this courtroom," the judge continued, his voice gathering strength. "It reflects a deeper societal issue that plagues our hierarchy. One's value cannot simply be measured by lineage or wealth." Isadora's heart soared as she heard the words she had longed to hear. The room, once so heavy with judgment, was transforming into a sanctuary of possibility. The Duke's eyes sparkled with pride as he turned to Isadora, a silent conversation passing between them. She understood the depths of his admiration. It was not only for her courage but also for the way she had ignited a fire in the hearts of those witnesses. As the court proceedings continued, she could sense the shift in energy, the subtle yet profound unification of purpose. Therefore, the judge proclaimed, "The court hereby recognizes Lady Isadora Pelham's rightful place in society, not just as a woman of noble birth but as a person of significant worth. In this instance, we are redefining our values." Gasps emerged from different corners of the room, some filled with disbelief while others were infused with a newfound respect. Isadora felt the swell of emotion bubbling within her chest as tears pricked her eyes. She had not fought for mere recognition but for a chance to change the narrative for all women who had felt voiceless. The Duke stepped forward, his voice ringing clear and steadfast. "We cannot allow ourselves to retreat to antiquated beliefs. As we reshape this hierarchy, let us remember the voices of those silenced for far too long." His words resonated like a clarion call, stirring a collective response from the crowd. Isadora watched as some heads nodded in agreement, a tangible shift in the atmosphere. "Let this decision be the beginning of a dialogue," he continued, his gaze sweeping across the courtroom. "It is our duty to uplift those marginalized by our own actions and beliefs. Society must evolve, and it begins with each of us recognizing our shared humanity. With each pronouncement, Isadora felt the shackles of doubt begin to crumble. She stood taller, empowered by the thought that her journey might pave the way for others. The courtroom had transformed from a site of judgment to a stage for change, and she was at the forefront of this revolution. The judge concluded, "In this court, we will no longer accept that one's worth is dictated by their status. Together, let's foster a culture that values every individual." As the gavel struck once more, sealing the court's decision, Isadora felt a surge of exhilaration. In that defining moment, she stepped into her new role, not merely as Lady Isadora Pelham, but as an advocate for justice and an agent of change. The Duke turned to her, his expression an intricate mix of admiration and affection. "Today, you have taught us all what it means to fight for one's worth," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for being a light in this darkened world." Isadora smiled through her tears, knowing that this was but the first step towards a broader understanding, a wider acceptance of what it meant to be valued. "Together, we will continue to speak for those who cannot," she vowed, her heart brimming with purpose. With newfound determination, Isadora stepped forward, ready to embrace the challenges ahead. She could not let this be the end of her story. Instead, it would be the beginning of an era where worth was redefined, and the voices of countless individuals would finally be heard. The courtroom, once a place of scrutiny, had transformed into a bastion of hope, and Isadora was committed to ensuring that the light of empathy and understanding would shine brightly from that day forward. As the sun began to set on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the remnants of the courtroom, Lady Isadora Pelham stood side by side with the Duke, their shared victory reverberating through the air. The once imposing walls that had echoed with the whispers of judgment were now infused with a sense of hope and transformation. Isadora breathed in deeply, feeling the weight of her past lift slightly, replaced by the promise of a brighter future. "You did it, Isadora," the Duke said, his voice rich with admiration. "You stood tall against them all, and your words changed everything. You have redefined what it means to be valuable in the eyes of society." His gaze held hers, filled with an understanding that transcended words. In that moment, she realized how far they had both come, how their lives had intertwined in ways that neither had anticipated. Isadora's heart swelled with a mix of pride and disbelief. She had entered that courtroom as a woman burdened by the chains of societal expectations, yet she had emerged as a beacon of hope for others. "It was not just me," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion swirling within her. "It was our collective courage. You believed in me when no one else would." The Duke nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "And now, we have a responsibility to continue this fight, to ensure that every voice is heard. Let's not allow this moment to fade into memory. We must create change that lasts." Isadora's thoughts raced ahead, envisioning a future where women were valued not for their lineage but for their character and contributions. The court had recognized her worth, and in doing so, it had ignited a flame that could burn bright enough to illuminate the path for others. "I want to do more than just advocate for myself," she declared, her spirit rekindling. "I want to help those who feel trapped beneath the weight of societal expectations." Together, they stepped out into the courtyard, where the last remnants of daylight twinkled against the stone walls. The crowd that had gathered outside was buzzing with excitement, their murmurs a mixture of disbelief and admiration. It struck Isadora that this was the beginning of a movement, a call for equality that would echo long after their presence faded. Amidst the throng, she spotted a familiar face, a young girl named Clara, who had often been overlooked in the grand halls of society. Clara's eyes widened as she recognized Isadora, a reflection of hope and possibility. "Lady Isadora," she called out, her voice breaking through the crowd. "You were brilliant. You showed us that we are worth something." Isadora knelt down to meet Clara's gaze. "Thank you, my dear. Remember, worth is not defined by what others say but by what you believe about yourself." Clara nodded vigorously, her small hands clenching into fists, determination shining in her young eyes. Isadora turned to the Duke and smiled. "We must inspire the next generation. They need to know they have power." The Duke took a step closer, resting a hand on Isadora's shoulder. Together, we can establish a platform for voices that have been silenced. Let's create a forum, perhaps even a society dedicated to advocating for those who cannot fight for themselves. His excitement was infectious, and Isadora felt a thrill of anticipation at the thought of their plans taking shape. Days turned into weeks, and the momentum they had started began to grow. Isadora organized gatherings that welcomed women from all walks of life, nobles and commoners alike, each sharing their stories and struggles. The discussions were rich and enlightening, transforming the initial whispers of doubt into a chorus of collective courage. One evening, as they wrapped up a meeting, the Duke looked at Isadora with fondness. "I see the change you are inspiring in others. It is remarkable to witness." "It is not just me," she replied, her heart swelling with gratitude. "It is a movement. A shared understanding that we must stand together." As their bond deepened, so too did the recognition that their relationship was more than just a friendship born of circumstance. Their shared purpose drew them closer, each interaction filled with warmth and unspoken affection. One evening, as they strolled in the moonlit gardens, the Duke paused, turning to her with a seriousness that made her heart race. "Isadora, in all that we have accomplished together, I find myself drawn to you in ways I never expected. Your strength inspires me, and your heart is one I want to protect." Overwhelmed, Isadora felt her cheeks flush. "You have been my champion, my confidant. I too feel something profound between us." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the world around them faded away. The connection they shared was undeniable, a blending of souls anchored in mutual respect and admiration. As their lips met in a soft, tentative kiss, it was as if the universe had conspired to bring them together in this moment of pure, unfiltered emotion. The journey ahead was uncertain, but together they would navigate the challenges, forging a path of change and love that would resonate throughout society. The courtroom that had once judged her worthlessness now stood as a testament to transformation, not only for Isadora but for countless others. As they walked hand in hand, a sense of purpose enveloped them. They knew that their fight was just beginning, and that love, coupled with conviction, could rewrite the very fabric of society. Through their unwavering determination, they would ensure that no one would ever feel worthless again, illuminating the shadows with the light of hope for generations to come.